The tide of war in 1943 was a relentless, crushing force. From the smoldering ruins of Stalingrad to the deep, resonant hum of Allied bombers over the Rhine, a grim calculus of attrition defined the age. Yet, far from the celebrated battlefields and the thunderous speeches of generals, a different, more clandestine war was being waged. Its soldiers were not trained infantrymen, but mathematicians, linguists, and cryptanalysts, hunched over reams of coded paper in quiet rooms. Their battlefield was the enigmatic German Enigma machine, a device so complex its creators believed its ciphers were unbreakable. And in this shadowy realm of intellect and intuition, one figure would emerge whose contributions were so profound they would bend the very arc of the conflict. Her name was Elsa von Hessler, a name you will not find in most history books, a woman whose story was buried by design, a secret too valuable to be told until now. Elsa's journey began not with a rifle, but with a brilliant, restless mind. Born in Munich to a university professor and a concert pianist, she displayed an almost preternatural talent for mathematics and logic from her earliest years. She devoured complex texts on theoretical physics and number theory, her intellect a bright, burning star in the genteel world of pre-war German academia. By 25, she was the youngest doctoral graduate in the history of her university, a prodigy whispered about in scholarly circles. Yet, as the dark cloud of National Socialism descended over Germany, Elsa's world constricted. Her un-German intellectual pursuits and her refusal to conform to the party's ideals for women made her a target. In 1938, seeing the grim future, she made a desperate, perilous escape to Britain, carrying little more than her formidable intellect and a burning resolve to fight the regime that had shattered her homeland. Arriving in London as a refugee, Elsa was initially viewed with deep suspicion. British intelligence, overwhelmed by a flood of displaced persons, saw a potential German spy in this quiet, intense young woman. For months, she was subjected to rigorous, often hostile interrogations at a safe house in Kensington, but her knowledge was her passport. During one pivotal session, she casually identified a flaw in a theoretical cipher model the interrogators were using, a model they believed was impenetrable. This demonstration of sheer genius, coupled with her unwavering anti-Nazi sentiments, finally convinced a senior MI6 officer of her value. She was not just another refugee. She was a unique weapon. In late 1939, she was quietly transferred to Bletchley Park, the war's most secret station, a place that would become the backdrop for her unprecedented intellectual crusade. Bletchley Park was a world of its own, a chaotic symphony of clacking typewriters, humming machinery, and the intense, hushed conversations of some of Britain's finest minds. Here, amidst the sprawling Victorian estate and its hastily constructed wooden huts, Elsa found her tribe, the Codebreakers. Yet, even in this bastion of intellect, she faced a different kind of battle. The environment was overwhelmingly male, and many senior figures were initially dismissive of this German woman. She was assigned to Hut 6, the section tackling Army and Air Force Enigma, and given rudimentary tasks. But Elsa's mind could not be contained. Working late into the foggy nights, she began to see patterns others missed. Correlations between operator errors and weather reports that hinted at a systemic vulnerability in the Germans' otherwise meticulous procedures. The Enigma machine itself was a masterpiece of mechanical encryption. It resembled a complex typewriter with a series of rotating rotors and a plug board, creating billions of possible cipher combinations that changed with every keystroke. The Germans' faith in it was absolute. Breaking it required more than just mathematical brilliance. It required an almost empathetic understanding of the enemy's mind, their routines, their protocols, their habits. Elsa possessed this in abundance. Her upbringing in Germany, her understanding of the military mindset gave her an intuitive edge. She postulated that the very arrogance of the German high command, their belief in their own superiority, could be their undoing. This insight would become the cornerstone of her entire operation. Elsa's first major breakthrough came indirectly, through what would later be termed traffic analysis. While others focused on the encrypted text itself, she began meticulously cataloging the metadata, the times of transmissions, their frequencies, their lengths, and their originating stations. She noticed that certain signals, sent at precise times each day from command centers in France, were consistently shorter and followed a rigid format. She theorized these were not battlefield reports, but daily setting sheets with Enigma machines themselves, encrypted with a simpler, older cipher for speed. By convincing her skeptical superiors to allocate bombs, the massive, clattering early computers used to test rotor settings to these specific signals, her team cracked a secondary network, providing a crucial daily key into the main Enigma ciphers. This initial success earned her a modicum of respect and a small, dedicated team of her own. They were the outsiders, a few brilliant mathematicians, a chess champion, and professor of ancient languages, all united under Elsa's quiet but firm leadership. Her method was collaborative yet demanding. She fostered an environment where every wild idea, no matter how seemingly absurd, was given consideration. It was in this crucible of collective genius that the concept of the procedural exploit was born. Elsa reasoned that since the machine itself was nearly perfect, the only weakness was a human being operating it. She began constructing psychological profiles of hypothetical German operators, predicting their lazy shortcuts and predictable choices. Her magnum opus, the operation that would truly hijack Hitler's plans, was born from a single brilliant deduction, analyzing decrypted messages concerning the North African campaign. She noticed a recurring, minor logistical officer mention in dispatches from Rommel's Africa Corps. This man, a Major Krause, was exceptionally meticulous, but his messages always began with the same formal, lengthy greeting. Elsa realized that this predictable crib, a known piece of plaintext, could be the wedge to force open the entire daily cipher. But it wasn't enough. She needed to manipulate the enemy into making a catastrophic error. She proposed an audacious plan to MI6. Use a double agent to feed false information to the Germans, suggesting that Major Krause's unit was about to be reassigned, prompting a flood of final, urgent messages, all using the same vulnerable structure. The plan, dubbed Operation Chameleon, was a supreme gamble. It required perfect synchronization between the codebreakers at Bletchley and the shadowy world of MI6 field agents. A captured German spy, turned by the British, transmitted the carefully crafted misinformation to his handlers in Berlin. As Elsa predicted, the reaction was swift. A flurry of messages concerning Krause's supposed reassignment and the transfer of his responsibilities flooded the airwaves. Because the messages were urgent, operators became sloppy, repeating formalities and skipping security protocols. This provided Elsa's team with the perfect, predictable cribs they needed to rapidly break the day's Enigma settings, giving the Allies an unprecedented, real-time window into Rommel's strategic mind. The intelligence coup was immediate and devastating. With the Africa Corps' Enigma traffic laid bare, General Montgomery's 8th Army knew Rommel's every move. His fuel status, his troop dispositions, his planned offensives, and his critical supply line vulnerabilities. The British were not just reading German mail. They were reading their general's personal diary. At the Second Battle of El Alamein, this advantage proved decisive. Montgomery, armed with Elsa's decryptions, could confidently outmaneuver the Desert Fox. He reinforced precisely where Rommel was weakest and feinted where he was strongest. The German panzer divisions, starved of fuel and anticipating a different battle entirely, were systematically dismantled, turning the tide of the North African campaign. The success of Operation Chameleon cemented Elsa's status as Bletchley's most valuable and most secret asset. She was given broader access and a larger team, but the pressure was immense. The fear was constant that the Germans would realize their cipher had been compromised and change their entire system, plunging the Allies back into darkness. Elsa's new focus became not just breaking the codes, but protecting the secret that they were broken. This involved a delicate dance of deception. Sometimes, the Allies had to deliberately avoid acting on certain intelligence, or stage a plausible reason for discovering it, such as a fake reconnaissance flight, to maintain the illusion of Enigma's invincibility. As the war turned towards Europe, Elsa faced her greatest challenge, the U-boat menace. Admiral Donit's wolf packs, guided by their own naval Enigma, a more complex four-rotor machine, were strangling Britain's lifeline across the Atlantic, sinking hundreds of thousands of tons of Allied shipping per month. They threatened to starve the nation into submission. The naval Enigma, known as Shark, was a different beast entirely, and Bletchley was struggling. Elsa, working in Hut 8 alongside Alan Turing, dedicated herself to this new puzzle. The isolation of U-boats and their shorter, more cryptic messages made finding cribs nearly impossible. The Battle of the Atlantic was being lost. Elsa's solution was one of breathtaking audacity. She proposed not just breaking shark, but stealing it. Her plan involved targeting a specific weather-reporting U-boat, known to use slightly less secure procedures. She coordinated with the Admiralty to have a Royal Navy destroyer group stalk this U-boat, not to sink it, but to force it to surface and allow the crew to abandon ship. The true objective was to capture the vessel intact and, crucially, seize its Enigma machine and the accompanying codebooks for the current month. It was an incredibly dangerous naval operation, requiring perfect weather and flawless execution, a high-stakes gamble on the high seas. On a stormy night in the North Atlantic, the plan was put into action. The HMS Gallant located the U-559 after a depth charge attack forced the damaged submarine to the surface. A boarding party braved heavy fire from the scrambling German crew. As the U-boat began to sink, 2 British sailors managed to retrieve the Enigma machine and the vital code books, passing them to a whaler before going down with the submarine themselves. Their sacrifice provided Elsa with the physical keys to the kingdom. The captured materials were rushed to Bletchley, where they allowed her team to reverse engineer the wiring and daily settings of the naval Enigma for months to come. The impact was immediate and revolutionary. Almost overnight, the opaque movements of the U-boat wolf packs became transparent to Allied convoy commanders. They could now reroute convoys around known U-boat patrol lines with pinpoint accuracy. The hunter became the hunted. Allied aircraft and destroyer groups were directed to the exact coordinates of U-boats, sinking them with devastating efficiency. The graphs of Allied shipping losses, which had been climbing toward a catastrophic peak, plummeted. The flow of American troops and supplies to Britain, essential for the coming invasion of Europe, was secured. Elsa's daring plan had not just broken a code. It had won a pivotal battle and saved the United Kingdom from potential collapse. With the Atlantic secured and the Italian campaign underway, the Allies' gaze turned to the ultimate objective, Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy. The entire enterprise hung on a knife's edge of deception. The Germans knew an invasion was coming. They just didn't know where or when. The success of the D-Day landings relied on convincing Hitler that the main assault would be at the Pas-de-Calais. This grand strategic deception, codenamed Operation Fortitude, was a masterpiece of misinformation, but its credibility depended entirely on Enigma decrypts. Only by reading German messages could the Allies know the enemy was believing the lie. Elsa and her team were at the heart of Fortitude. Their task was to monitor the reactions of the German High Command, particularly the messages of Field Marshal Rommel, now in charge of the Atlantic Wall defenses. They provided daily, sometimes hourly, updates on which German units were being moved, where reinforcements were being sent, and, most importantly, the level of belief in the Pas-de-Calais fiction. The decrypts confirmed that the German High Command, including Hitler himself, was completely taken in. Panzer divisions that could have crushed the beachhead at Normandy were held in reserve, awaiting an invasion that would never come. All because the intelligence and what they believed was their secure Enigma network told them to wait. On June 6, 1944, as the largest amphibious invasion force in history churned toward the French coast, Elsa and her team worked in a state of control frenzy. The decrypted German messages revealed chaos and confusion on the enemy's side. Reports were fragmented. Commands were contradictory. Crucially, they confirmed that the Strategic Reserve, the 15th Army, remained immobile around Calais, still expecting the main attack. The deception had held. The intelligence provided by Elsa's unit was relayed directly to Eisenhower's headquarters, giving the Supreme Commander the confidence that his colossal gamble was working. The foothold in Europe was secured, a direct result of the invisible war won at Bletchley Park. In the war's final, brutal year, Elsa's work continued unabated. The decrypts now reveal the crumbling interior of the Third Reich, the desperate shifting of divisions during the Battle of the Bulge, the squabbling between Nazi leaders, and the frantic attempts to protect Berlin. Elsa read the increasingly delusional orders from Hitler's bunker, a stark contrast to the disciplined communications of just years before. For her, it was a strange and somber vindication. She was reading the death rattle of the regime that had driven her from her home, a regime being defeated in no small part by the relentless intellectual assault she had led from a quiet English manor house. When victory in Europe was finally declared on May 8, 1945, the celebrations that swept across the free world did not reach Elsa von Hessler. There was no public recognition, no medal ceremony. Her war ended as it had begun, in silence and secrecy. Under the Official Secrets Act, she and every other Bletchley Park veteran were legally bound to never speak of their work. The machines were silenced, the files were locked away, and the thousands of men and women who had labored there simply returned to their civilian lives, their monumental achievements unknown. For Elsa, it was a bittersweet conclusion. The evil was defeated. But her story, the story of how one woman's mind had helped hijack the plans of a tyrant, was buried by the very nation she had saved. In the immediate post-war years, Elsa faded into obscurity. She took a research position at a small, quiet university, her public work a pale shadow of the world-altering cryptography she had mastered. She watched in silence as the history of the war was written, a history that made no mention of Bletchley Park or the role of intelligence. She saw the generals and the statesmen celebrated, while the true architects of victory remained in the shadows. It was a profound and lonely burden to carry, knowing the truth but being forbidden from speaking it, her greatest triumphs classified as state secrets for decades to come. The first crack in the wall of silence came in 1974, with the publication of a book that hinted at the Allied breaking of Enigma. For Elsa, now in her 60s and living a life of quiet retirement, it was a moment of immense personal significance. The secret was beginning to seep out. While the book was incomplete and contained inaccuracies, it started a public conversation. Journalists began digging, and former Bletchley staff, though still cautious, became slightly more willing to share their stories. The official veil of secrecy was slowly, reluctantly, being lifted, and the world began to learn of the ultra-secret. The full, staggering truth of Bletchley Park's contribution did not become public knowledge until the late 1970s and early 80s, when the official archives were finally declassified. Historians were stunned. The prevailing narratives of the war had to be completely rewritten. Battles that were thought to have been won by sheer military grit were now understood to have been profoundly shaped by superior intelligence. The victories at El Alamein, the triumph in the Atlantic, the success of D-Day, all were now seen in a new light. And as the stories emerged, a few names began to circulate among the Conoscenti. Names like Turing and, in hushed, reverent tones, the name of Elsa von Hessler. In her final years, Elsa was finally approached by historians seeking to document the complete story. After a lifetime of silence, she agreed to a series of private, recorded interviews. Speaking with sharp, clear-eyed recall that belied her age, she meticulously reconstructed her methods, her breakthroughs, and the immense pressure of those war years. She spoke not for glory, but for the record, to ensure that the contributions of her team and the sacrifice of those like the sailors on the U-559 were not lost to history. Her testimony became the cornerstone for a new, more accurate understanding of the secret war. When Elsa von Hessler passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1989, her obituary in major newspapers was brief, noting her as a mathematician who contributed to the war effort. The full, breathtaking scope of her work was still not widely known, but among intelligence communities and military historians, her name was legendary. She was the architect of the procedural exploit, the mind behind Operation Chameleon, and the driving force that cracked the U-boat Enigma. She was, in the truest sense, a silent warrior whose battles were fought not with bullets, but with intellect and an unshakable will. Today, declassified documents allow us to fully appreciate the magnitude of her impact. Modern analysts estimate that the intelligence derived from her work shortened the war in Europe by at least 2 years, saving countless millions of lives. Every day the war continued meant more Holocaust victims, more dead soldiers, more devastated cities. By hijacking Hitler's plans and turning his own secrets against him, Elsa von Hessler did not just help win battles. She altered the very timeline of the 20th century, compressing the period of Nazi tyranny and shaping the world that emerged from the ashes. Her legacy is a complex one. It raises profound questions about the nature of warfare, the value of intellect over brute force, and the hidden roles of women in history. For decades, the story of World War II was a story of male leadership and male sacrifice. Elsa's story forces a reckoning, demonstrating that the conflict was also won in rooms where women played decisive, commanding roles, their strategic brilliance equaling that of any five-star general. She was a pioneer not just in cryptography, but in shattering the constraints placed upon her gender. Bletchley Park itself now stands as a museum, a testament to thousands who worked there in silence. In a quiet corner, one can find a small display dedicated to Elsa von Hessler. It holds her photograph, a few of her personal notes, and a replica of the Enigma machine she helped to defeat. Visitors pause there, trying to comprehend a mind that could see through such complexity. It is a place of quiet homage, a recognition that finally arrived, even if it was decades too late for Elsa to fully appreciate. The lessons of her story resonate powerfully in our modern age, an era defined by cyber warfare and information security. Elsa von Hessler understood before almost anyone that the strongest system is only as secure as its most predictable human element. Her methods of psychological profiling and traffic analysis are the direct ancestors of modern cybersecurity techniques used to combat today's digital threats. The battle she fought in Hut 6 continues today in server farms and intelligence agencies around the globe, a silent, ongoing war wits. So, as the final credits roll on the story of the Second World War, we must ensure the name Elsa von Hessler is remembered not as a footnote, but as a titan. Her weapon was her intellect, her battlefield was a realm of abstract symbols, and her victory saved the free world. She was a woman who, from a small, cluttered room in England, reached across the channel into the very heart of the Nazi war machine and hijacked Hitler's plans, irrevocably changing the course of human history. Her war was silent, but its echoes will be heard for centuries to come.